Thanks to the bastards at Blockchain for Europe for putting me up here, because they know it's my favorite topic and I'm the moderator, so I can't talk. Thank you so much, Tommaso. That's excellent. But we have two wonderful experts that know much more than I do here, Agata and Izabela. And before we dive into this topic, also to set a little bit the scene as we heard for later today, can I kindly ask you to very briefly introduce yourselves and give us one or two sentences on what triggers you when we talk about privacy. Maybe we start with you, Izabela, and then Agata.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Izabela. I'm from Web3 Technologies Foundation in Switzerland. Polkadot is one of our flagship projects, so you might have heard about it. And I'm very, very happy to be here today and to be speaking specifically on this panel because I think it's a very interesting intellectual challenge, the privacy discussion in decentralized systems, because in a way we're walking history backwards. We are thinking how privacy should have been designed at the time the internet was born. And I feel like if we get this right, we're not only going to patch the internet, but we're also going to give people choices, that their interactions with digital world don't necessarily have to mean that they have to give up their data. And I find that challenge very exciting.
Hello, my name is Agata. I am a Chief Legal Officer for Institute of Free Technology. We are developing decentralized privacy-preserving tech stack that comprises of blockchain communication layer and storage layer. And what triggers me, maybe not triggers me, but what I would like to contribute to this debate is broadening the narrative around privacy. And I hope we can discuss this a little more in a moment. I note that the privacy is now becoming a trendy topic. So I think this is the right time to reset the narrative and talk a little bit about the deeper meaning of privacy beyond the headlines and what seems to be hype as well.
I think that's an excellent introduction to our first round of discussion. And let's keep in mind that when we talk in the digital ecosystem about privacy, that we have a fundamental issue here. In the offline world, I have lots of places to hide. I can secure my privacy much better than in the digital world, specifically on DLT, where everything is supposed to be transparent. Still, looking at the fundamental importance, I think that privacy has, indeed, as Agata, you said, and I would like to start with you in a second. We note, for example, this year, when we look at the prices of privacy coins, which I love very much, that indeed there is a strong hype element. The last couple of months, they went massively up. Now they're going a bit down again, but it seems at a time when actually a lot of people have said that privacy is a nice to have or is just an add-on, that there seems to be a more fundamentally positive evaluation of privacy. But that is crypto. We talk also about privacy-enhancing technologies which are more complex. So Agata, from, let's say, a more macro perspective, what is the true relevance that you attach to privacy in a decentralized setting, and why is it, as you say, more than just a hype or a fashion, but why should we all be busy with privacy every moment and in every context that we deal with in a decentralized setting?
So, as the title of our panel suggests, this is something to do with infrastructure. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very encouraging and hopeful to see so many conversations about privacy recently, so many efforts to include that in the agenda, include that in the debates, and so many positive signs that the role of privacy starts to be acknowledged. It's not anymore an awkward topic in Web3 as it was maybe some time ago, not a niche concern. It's actually a concern and in the interest of the whole industry to address that. What also happens with a topic like that becoming so popular, I note that it sort of tends to collapse all the debates across different conversations, panels, events, I sometimes have an impression that those debates collapse into a single storyline, and that storyline is usually around some kind of compliance checkbox or regulatory anxiety, sometimes I like to call it that way. And compliance is very important. Compliance and regulatory obligations that we are all familiar with, that may sometimes be perceived in tension with privacy. This is very important, but it's also very important to highlight that this is not the whole story around privacy, because privacy in the context of architecture and infrastructure, I would like to encourage and invite everyone to broaden the narrative and frame the privacy from the perspective of architectural principle. Our governance systems, for example, democratic systems, are relying on boundaries, separation of powers, due process, and so on. Now, in digital systems, these boundaries are sometimes or often erased. And there is this indiscriminate visibility across the traditional technology stack, but also the blockchain technology stack. So that erases the boundaries. And when everything is visible and traceable in an indiscriminate way, then the trust collapses. And this is not true transparency. This is actually overexposure, structural overexposure. So I believe that privacy is that ingredient that should be embedded in our digital infrastructures to bring back the boundaries that the digital infrastructures should always have had. And we can, instead of thinking of it in the context of this word privacy that is sometimes associated with regulatory obligations alone, let's broaden our framework, broaden our narrative to things like architectural repair of our digital systems, system-level resilience, legitimacy of digital frameworks, because power and control and all these other principles, they need boundaries as well. And privacy is what brings these boundaries into our architectures. So this is not only about the user-level privacy, it's also about the architecture, underlying architecture. And privacy is that ingredient that helps bring the boundaries, that helps increase neutrality and resilience of our infrastructure, because if the infrastructure and all the participants in it are overexposed, then the system itself is prone to manipulation, prone to pressure, prone to capture. And we need to ensure that our infrastructure is resilient, is legitimate, allows legitimate governance within the boundaries, and protects the privacy not only for the users, but also for the participants other than users.
I think that's very important, Agata. And for those in the audience that have not yet read it, you wrote a piece on privacy for Blockchain for Europe, where you set out these thoughts. It's much in line with what we did also with the Digital Freedom Declaration. Now, Izabela, listening to that, and from your perspective, you mentioned Polkadot, for example, a very large community also on the layer 0. So we know that through the transparency of DLT systems, we can be more easily observed than offline. If we feel observed, we change our behavior. It also resets incentives, specifically if we design tools, if we use privacy-enhancing technologies in order perhaps to be compliant. Before perhaps in the next question we go down to the tool level, when you look at decentralized infrastructures and the communities therein, what role do you attach to privacy, and how can it be met by the organizations that you represent?
So I think in terms of privacy infrastructure, Web3 is already a much better starting point compared to Web2, right? Because if you think about it, the entire privacy experience in Web2, it basically relies on what a company states in their privacy policy. And even if you read those lengthy policies, you have no means to verify it. Whereas with Web3 and blockchain, privacy is guaranteed programmatically, right? So that's already a big step. Now, there is still some work that needs to be done. That's very clear, because whilst it's arguable whether there's any personal data on blockchain, there's still tons of metadata, right, which disclose certain behavior patterns, financial patterns. And you know all about it. There's businesses being built based on the fact that there's so much data out there up for grabs. Now, I think what Agata said is very important, meaning that the industry recognizes that privacy is something that has to be improved upon. When you attend many conferences, you know, you hear about privacy from left to right, whether as a legal or as a technical topic. So the industry is clearly working on fixing it. However, I think that we do have very serious challenges ahead. You might have heard in recent months about the fact that there are some estimates that in just 5 years from now, by 2030, quantum computers will be powerful enough to break encryption. If that happens, it's not only crypto that will be in trouble, because banks, healthcare, telecom, they all use encryption as well. And there's groups of people working right now on harvesting encrypted data today with the hopes to decrypt it later. But I think what's unique about decentralized systems is that with our infrastructure, we have the tools and the right setup to react globally at scale and do protocol upgrades. And I think that compared to that, the legacy systems will be struggling enormously.
Let's follow up on this. And interesting that you mentioned quantum. I mean, we all know what is out there. We don't know when it comes. What we do know is that DLT ecosystems, whether that is Ethereum, whether that is Bitcoin or others, have been extremely active actually to find safeguards and plans to move forward in case this happens. And probably distributed systems like these are the most resilient ones when the quantum threat comes into real life. But what would it mean in the daily operations, I would say, in decentralized communities? Because we discussed the need for compliance, we also discussed the negative image in large parts of the regulators' world that privacy-enhancing technologies or mixers, other obfuscation technologies have. I love them, I use them, but very often this is seen as the playground for criminals. So what can be done in practical terms, perhaps if we look at the whole decentralized infrastructure, not only to implement tools, but also to work perhaps on the image that these things have, because we know very well, and would like to start with Izabela and then come to you, Agata, to demonstrate how meaningful this actually is. And actually we're talking about a fundamental right. We are not talking about a luxury that we put upon. So what can we do in order to make this operational but also more acceptable? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So basically, what's a bit unfortunate about privacy tools is that they sit just right in the middle between privacy laws, which are there to protect our privacy. It's something that's very fundamental to us. And at the same time, you have anti-money laundering laws, which are essentially prohibiting anonymity. So they very much prescribe and demand traceability. Ironically, privacy mixers are something that a GDPR doctor would prescribe because they're breaking those links between transactions, wallets, and essentially protecting our privacy. And but I think, though, this is not really a technical problem to solve. It's an ideological debate that needs to happen because these two legislations, they're both contradicting each other. And also what's worrying me, and I have a lot of sympathy for what you said, is that people tend to associate those privacy-preserving tools with Web3 with suspicious or even a criminal activity. Whereas if you compare it to other privacy-preserving tools in Web2, for example, VPN, many of you are probably using VPN. For example, for our company, it's even a standard security practice that if you want to join a public network, you're supposed to do that through VPN. And yet VPN doesn't enjoy nearly such a bad reputation as privacy-preserving tools in Web3 are. So but I think, it's this old type of thinking that it's either privacy or traceability. And I think Web3 has solutions already today to show us the third way, which is selective disclosure. And here what I'm referring to is mostly zero-knowledge proofs, right, that allow you to show just the right amount of data. So, for example, for age verification, you don't necessarily need to upload your entire passport photo, with this ugly picture with your address, social security number. You just need to prove whether you're 18 or more, and that's it, right? So I think regulators should be more leaning towards this, and keep that in mind, because I think in order for our industry to be successful, we must guarantee those two ingredients: privacy, because it's actually our key selling point, and compliance, because we don't operate in a vacuum, and mass adoption will not happen if we're not offering compliant products. And I think Web3 will help us to do this.
And Agata, I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on this. And I would like to add two dimensions that we have heard in part earlier today. One is the digital product passport, which is a key initiative that we have in Europe. And when this comes, and when this will include new elements, for example, our new initiative on fighting forced labor, where you will have to demonstrate globally that you do not use forced labor in any sort of supply chain. If you put all that personal information of the concrete people and the concrete ingredients that you use for every type of production into a centralized database, and you don't protect for privacy, you have basically the wet dream of any sort of totalitarian person that is out there, because we will be completely exposed if we do not use privacy-enhancing technologies. And the second thing is that we already now note in Europe that it is a big disadvantage for competitiveness, because developers are more and more concerned to build these technologies, looking, for example, at the Tornado Cash case in the Netherlands that, in my opinion, gets the whole approach completely wrong. So what is your take on this, and what is, I would say, the forward-looking element in this discussion, noting that privacy will still become much more important in these concrete applications when we deal with the things that Izabela has commented upon? Is it manageable, or would you have additional thoughts on this?
So I would like to go back to infrastructure, and there are a lot of misconceptions, I think misunderstandings, and some wrong kind of even judiciary approach to privacy. So let's just reset that conversation. The problem with some of these tools are as follows. They sit as these isolated islands on fully transparent networks. What we need to start thinking about is embedding privacy sort of bottom up, aligning that with our constitutional values. And these are separation of powers, privacy, human dignity. We can read those in EU charters, EU treaties, but also pretty much any regulation, including GDPR, includes in recitals reference to fundamental rights and including privacy. So building our infrastructure that aligns with these values requires privacy as a structural boundary, as an architectural principle. Then as you go up the stack, then similar sort of considerations apply to the higher layers of the stack as well, including user-facing applications and so on. In terms of compliance, then our model of compliance is aligned with and based on existing digital infrastructure, which sort of, first of all, assumes some level of centralization and centralized actors, and models itself of mass data collection for all kinds of compliance, reporting, and so on. We should reframe that paradigm into instead of shared visibility and mass data collection, shared verification and ZK knowledge technologies would allow that sort of solutions. So it's sort of bottom up, all layers of the stack, reconfiguring our regulatory approaches as well. From this model based on mass data collection, centralized databases, centralized actors sitting, intermediating certain activities, to recognizing that we can now change that model into verification model and acknowledging that some activities are not intermediated anymore but peer-to-peer. So if we look at just constitutional values, just fundamental rights alone, then if we apply these principles to how we build our digital infrastructure that we all rely on, then we will achieve that synergy. And if I also may add, going forward, I think that also in terms of security, system-level resilience of our digital infrastructure, trust, because trust collapses if there is indiscriminate visibility, legitimate governance, all of this links in some way or another to privacy. That is that ingredient that can allow us to achieve all these different fundamental principles. So when we think about privacy going forward, I would like, it would be my sort of appeal to start thinking about also security, neutrality, legitimate governance, separation of powers, system-level resilience, trust. These are all values that privacy enables. So privacy is not in conflict with compliance, is not in conflict with fundamental rights, is not in conflict with our constitutional principles. In fact, we can now build our digital systems thanks to blockchain technology that truly aligns with these values.
That was a very strong statement, and as our time is nearly up, perhaps one very last, very short statement of each of you, because when you now look forward based on what you both said, and we'll probably indeed also have the situation that these privacy reflections do not only relate to DLT, they relate basically to everything that is out there in the digital domain. Do you see reason for optimism when you talk at a lot of events to communities, but also to regulators and policymakers to understand that, or would you be more in a pessimistic mode? Perhaps one last statement each, starting with you, Agata, very briefly.
Mixed. I have mixed emotions, there are mixed perception, yes and no. I have slight concern. I think we cannot allow privacy to become a commodity, extractable, repackaged, resold, premium service, exclusive, not inclusive. Privacy should be embedded in our infrastructure to protect everyone, all participants, and our infrastructure itself including. So this, we should resist the temptation of trying to strip privacy as some sort of add-on that you can then strip away or repackage, sell, crop, chop, and so on.
Very good. Izabela.
I am more optimistic. I think we're getting there. And the more events and conferences I attend, also with various regulators, not only here, but also in the US, the vibe is clearly changing. I'm not saying that everyone is all of a sudden pro-crypto, but I think this bad reputation which the industry really gained because of what happened with FTX, with Tornado Cash, that's fading away. People start using, for example, stable coins. So no, it's no longer that scary thing. It's just becomes part of your regular day.
Wonderful, the vibe is changing. So that is the moment for Tommaso as the master of vibe to come in. Do we have a moment for perhaps an audience question, or is time up?
Sorry, yeah, we are a bit short on time.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. Then thank you so much, and please give an applause to our fabulous experts here on stage. Thank you.